I'm going to talk about where new financial markets are headed and what's being built today in the world. And we call these new financial markets open financial primitives. And I'm going to explain what that means because it's a little bit complicated. To start with, a little bit about my background. I'm the founder of Compound. We're one of these new markets on the Ethereum blockchain. We're creating interest rates for different crypto assets on Ethereum. At night, I spend a lot of time thinking about economics. And on the weekends, I spend a lot of time thinking about other projects building things in this ecosystem. And I'd like to invest in the best projects. So if you're building something cool, talk to me afterwards. So what is an open financial primitive? This is a really weird phrase, and there's a lot packed in here. So the full definition is they are composable building blocks of economic functions, each a self-sustaining system made available to developers. Wow, that's a lot. Why don't we break this apart word by word so you guys can get a sense of what's getting built out there in the world. So composable means that it's able to be used in conjunction with other systems. It doesn't live on its own. It's not meant to be a little sandbox. Economic means there's something happening here with economic motivations or incentives. People are doing this to make money in some fashion. Self-sustaining means they exist entirely on their own. They don't need any outside resources to run. They operate as closed packages. And available means any developer can interact with a financial primitive. Any developer can read the source code or choose to include them in their own projects. Financial primitives are basically building blocks that are being built for the most part right now on Ethereum that provide economic activity. And I'll talk through a couple of the most popular examples. So one example is a system called 0x. 0x is a financial primitive that allows people to trade. That's all it does. It allows people to exchange one asset for another asset. It's up to users to decide what those assets are. It's up to developers to decide where this superpower of trading gets built. Any new application can build trading into it. And this concept of trade execution is made available to the entire Ethereum ecosystem. And it's flourishing in all types of new ways. It's just one building block, and it's being used everywhere. Another financial primitive is Dharma. They're creating a system for users to structure loans between themselves. These loans can exist as a self-sustaining system. I can loan you money. You can loan me money for 6 months. But they can also be included elsewhere in the open financial system. These loans can be traded on 0x. These loans can be sent to a friend. These loans are able to be recycled and reused and built upon by pretty much any developer. There's Maker. If you guys have heard of the stablecoin DAI, Maker is a financial primitive for credit. You can basically take an asset that you already own, like Ether, and you can extract a new asset from it, DAI. It's a financial primitive to give yourself credit based on the assets you already own. There's Compound, which is creating interest rates for different Ethereum assets. It's a short-term interest rate. Anybody can choose to earn this interest rate or to borrow the asset at this interest rate. And there's a complete open landscape that doesn't even exist yet. Anyone in this room, if they sit down and play around with Solidity, can build a new financial primitive, a new tool that other users can interact with in the new economy. This list is small, but it's rapidly growing. So what makes a primitive really, really interesting is that it can be combined with other primitives. You can take the ability to trade and combine it with an interest rate. You can take the ability to trade and combine it with credit. You can take a short-term interest rate and combine it with a loan. You can basically mash up these financial primitives like they're literally building blocks, and you can build new applications on top of them. Because they're open, anyone can create new experiences. Anybody can design new interfaces and new use cases. They're basically used as the inputs into mashups of new experiences. So a great example is you could take 0x, which is the ability to execute a trade, and compound, which is the ability to borrow at a specific interest rate. And when you combine them, the ability to borrow with the ability to trade, you could create a short sale. You could borrow and then trade simultaneously as one cohesive experience. And the possibilities are endless. You can literally take any of these new tools and systems being built on Ethereum and mash them up in new ways. There's no one to stop you. There's no one to tell you what's right and what's wrong. The market will decide if they want it or not. And multiple developers can build the same types of experiences. Just because there's one application that does this, another application can do the same thing. These systems are open. Anyone can extend them. And what we're left with is a financial system that's created by developers and the users and us in this room, and it's radically different than the financial system that most of us are used to. Using these financial primitives, we're able to build a financial system that's open. Anyone is able to interact with it, no matter what country you live in, no matter what time of day it is. It's completely driven by software, and it's completely open. It's transparent. Everything is happening out in the open. The source code to all of these systems is available for you to read. The transaction history is available to you on the blockchain. Every single interaction is public. You get to see exactly what's happening inside each of these financial primitives as it occurs, and that's really powerful. People like, and companies like The Graph are making it even more transparent. They're making all of this information queryable by any other developer. All of this information that's happening in this new financial system is at our fingertips. It's extensible. Anyone can take it in new directions. If something's working and you have an idea to make it work better or in a new way, you can do so. And it's fair. It's driven by code, which behaves the same for every single user, not based on arbitrary parameters. And this future financial system that's being built right now using these financial primitives is exciting. When you play around with the new tools on Ethereum, when you interact with Compound and earn interest on your DAI or on your Ether, or when you do a trade using 0x, it just feels so much different than going to the bank or calling up your broker or using the tools of the existing financial system. I predict that everything that we have today in our financial system will be replicated in an open future financial system, but one that's more transparent, extensible, and fair. And that's really exciting. Oop. Now, there's a whole future of financial primitives that don't exist yet. Pretty much every single component of the existing financial system will become a primitive, a project on the Ethereum blockchain. Right now, we have a few of these primitives out in the wild. We have trade execution, we have tradable loans, we have credit, we have spot interest rates. But there's a whole host of different primitives that have yet to be built. In fact, the list probably goes for many, many slides. I just put out there a few that are yet to exist. If you're a developer looking for something to build in this space, there are so many things that you can build. Swaps are actually a very interesting example because you can start to break apart credit risk and liquidity risk and duration risk. But there's so many financial primitives. Every one of these little transparent boxes is a project or a company waiting to happen. And that's really exciting. And over the next couple of years, we're going to constantly see new use cases and new primitives and new ideas get developed that we haven't even thought about yet in this room. There's a massive opportunity that's yet to be untouched. So I'll pose one question, which is important. Where and how will these systems be built? Right now, all of this activity is occurring on Ethereum. Ethereum has a rapidly growing, decentralized financial ecosystem. And everything works because it's all in one place. There's a lot of other blockchains that are being built where theoretically new open financial ecosystems will also be built. And there's a lot of these activities occurring outside of blockchains. They're still occurring the old-fashioned way, with pen and paper. They're occurring over the counter. They're occurring in ways that don't yet interact. If we're going to build a new open financial system, it actually has to work. with all of the other components. We can't isolate ourselves just to one location. We can't say, oh, there's this new amazing ecosystem, but you have to be on Ethereum. Because not everyone's going to be on Ethereum. It's not right for every single developer. It's not right for every single trader. It's not right for every single application. It's the most fertile ground right now. And it's the best place for an application to get built. And it's why we're seeing this new financial ecosystem unfolding on top of Ethereum. But in order for this to truly succeed, it's going to have to exist and get developed everywhere. And it's going to exist with lots of different technologies and in lots of different places. And what's interesting to think about is how we can build interoperability between these different components of a new open financial system and how it's all going to play together. If you're a developer right now, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to consider. There's so much opportunity to help craft a new economic narrative, and there's a lot of directions you can go with it right now. What I've enjoyed so far building Compound is that we're able to create functioning interest rate markets that are alive today. People all around the world, people in Australia, in Europe, in South America, are able to interact with our markets at pretty much any hour of the day. They're using it in new use cases. They're saying, oh, I'm keeping my savings in DAI instead of dollars now. And I'm earning interest on them. And it's enjoyable to use a new approach. And there's just so much farther that we're going to go as a society and as developers in creating a larger open ecosystem. With the last few minutes I have left, I kind of want to open up to Q&A. Let the crowd ask whatever they want to ask. If there's anything you want to know about building an open financial primitive, ask away. If there's anything you're curious about, ask that too.
How do you ensure people pay back the...
So we require collateral. So basically, at Compound, the protocol, which it's autonomous software, what allows someone to borrow from the protocol at any hour of the day instantaneously without having to wait for a counterparty, without having to negotiate, is the ability to make sure that they can't just run away with what they're borrowing. So our protocol relies on collateral. There's a lot of other approaches that one could take. They could do it based on reputation. They could do it based on credit parameters. But our system, for the time being, relies exclusively on collateral.
Yeah, so we are seeing more and more open financial primitives, such as like Dama or like UIDX, that are not, or even compounds that do not really have like a native token, right? So for those open financial services, like how do you see them capture value, right? How do the companies and teams behind them actually profit from what they're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of these new financial primitives don't have tokens. And I would actually wager that not having a token is what allows it to be even more interoperable and more open. When you require an arbitrary asset in order to use one of these components, it's less likely to be used. And so I think the natural state of them is to be as frictionless as possible, to not require another token. And the way that these projects capture value should be unique to the actual primitive that's being built. At Compound, because we're creating interest rate markets, our team keeps a very small portion of the interest that moves through the system. And it's a business model that's extremely native to the financial primitive itself. I could theoretically see a trading primitive keeping a very small portion of the assets being traded. There's a lot of ways to go about this, and there's a lot of new business models that have yet to be explored. And some of them won't have business models. Part of what made open source so powerful and what allowed applications on the internet to develop faster and faster and faster is that there's more and more open source repositories and libraries and code. And not all of them will have business models. Not all of them are required to have a fee. We might see financial primitives that are just done for the benefit of the community. That's a great question. How do you solve for liquidity? So some of these don't have to solve for liquidity. They might be something as simple as the ability to facilitate a trade. I can build that into my application, and I can come up with the liquidity. Others of them might need to jumpstart liquidity. At Compound, we're creating a marketplace, essentially. And so we jumpstarted liquidity by talking to lots and lots of different small crypto funds. And to say, even before we launched, this is what we're building, this is how it will work, and educating users before it even went live. So that when it went live, we were able to quickly accumulate liquidity. I think every project will approach this differently, and it really comes down to what are you building? Oh, yeah, whoever. Anyone else? Cool, well, thank you. Have a great rest of the graph day. And if you have any other questions, talk to me afterwards.